A recession is typically defined as an economic downturn whereby the gross domestic product (GDP) is declining or negative for two consecutive quarters. Now, in this video, we're not going to be talking about whether we are heading for a recession or how soon that's going to happen. And instead, we're going to be focusing on ways to prepare for a potential recession. Let's get into it. Now, the first way to prepare for a potential recession is by closely monitoring your expenses and income. It is very much similar to a budgeting exercise whereby you want to closely keep track of all the income that comes in to your accounts, as well as all your expenses throughout the months. You want to closely monitor that, jotting down every single expense. Why it's important is the fact that it allows you to really take a step back and assess your expenses particularly. Now, there are certain types of expenses that cannot be avoided. Things like paying for your accommodation, shelter, paying for your food, or healthcare costs. That said, there are other types of expenses that are considered more of a consumer discretionary expenses. Things like having that streaming paid service like Netflix or Disney or Amazon Prime, or things like going out to a restaurant. Such type of expenses are considered to be consumer discretionary. Now, we are not saying that necessarily you have to cut off all your consumer discretionary, but having jotted down all your expenses and categorizing them into the respective category that they fall in allows you to take a step back and assess where your expenses are being spent on. During a recession, as well as the months leading up to it, might be a perfect time for you to try to minimize your discretionary expenses as much as possible. Say if you were planning to do travel around the world, might not be the best time for you to do that. Or as commonly it occurs during a recession, many folks tend to postpone a large purchase, such as purchase of a home or purchase of a car or things of that nature. You might be asking why that is the case. For a number of reasons. During the recession, because of that economic downturn, there is going to be huge implications to the pricing of such purchases. Like let's say buying and housing market might be impacted by as a result of that, as well as the many folks might be losing their job. In fact, one of the downstreaming impact of a recession is the loss of jobs, increase in unemployment, and the negative impacts to the economy as a whole. The second way to prepare for a recession is by ensuring that you have proper emergency funds. Typically, we recommend 3 to 6 months of emergency funds to have, and this consists of 3 to 6 months of approximately your monthly expenses. That's why the first exercise and step that for you to understand exactly how much your monthly expenses are helps you to calculate how much money you need to set aside for that. Well, having an emergency fund is important no matter what time and what environment we are in. During a recession, they become even more important, potentially because there are folks who might be losing their jobs. And that's why you want to make sure you've set aside enough money to weather through that stormy environment of a recession, loss of jobs, and any implications that might have been to you and your immediate family. That's really important. We talked about the potential of loss of jobs. If you do have a home that at this time you are having a mortgage on, it is so important for you to make sure you set aside enough savings to be able to continue to pay your mortgage over time. Because the last thing you want to happen is a recession hit, you lose your job, and during that time, because you cannot pay your mortgage, you are defaulted on your home and you lose your home. That's the last thing we want to see happen. In fact, that's what many people had to go through, unfortunately, during the recession of 2008 and 2009, during those years. So we want to be really mindful of that. If you do have a debt with a higher interest rate, I think it would be wise for you to try to tackle that first, because as the interest rates continue to grow, you're paying much more interest on that, and your debt is going to snowball and grow in a negative way. So yes, as soon as you being able to tackle those and get rid of those debts, it actually allows you to save on the interest that you're paying to lenders for having that debt in there. Lastly, the third way to prepare for a recession is by trying to diversify your skills, increasing your skill sets, and finding ways to generate passive income for yourself. Why this is important is that if, God forbid, during the recession, you lose your job, at least by increasing your skill sets, by learning new skills, you are increasing your employability. You are trying to make sure that your resume is updated. You have the right set of skills that allows you to be employable at different industries and different sectors. That's super important. And times like this, where there's less stress for you before you lose your job. And we hope that never happens, but at least before that occurs, it's time for you to try to expand on your skill sets and knowledge. Some of you may be self-employed, and that's totally fine too. In those cases, you might want to consider ways to increase your revenue streams, not just solely relying on one revenue channel, because if that goes south, then you are going to be in a difficult spot. And you want to make sure you expand on those revenue streams, have revenue coming in from different channels. We did make a video here on our channel talking about our 7 different revenue streams that we currently have. I'll definitely add the link to the description of the video. Be sure to check it out. It might give you some ideas of ways you might consider expanding on your own revenue stream. Now, lastly, there is one bonus tip that I have for you, and it's trying to build a larger cash position. Of course, it would fall within the category of building an emergency fund, but you don't have to stop there. In fact, you could continue to build a larger cash position for you. This allows you to be able to deploy that funds at the right time. Typically, during a recession, various investment avenues get hit hard. This includes the stock market. In fact, during the recession of 2007 and 2009, the S&P 500 on average from its peak to trough went down by almost 55%. That's a huge decline to S&P 500. Now, of course, it recovered in a matter of a few years, but here's the kicker. If you do have enough savings on the side, enough cash position built up on the side, you can really now deploy that fund at that right time, get into the market, and then reap the benefit of that timing the market at almost like a perfect, taking advantage of that perfect scenarios. Now, while we hope we are not necessarily gonna have a recession, it is inevitable that in every few years it might happen, especially the way that different indicators are pointing out and how the year has started in terms of the stock market's performance so far. There is a strong possibility that we might get there, if not already. So for me personally, I am trying to build a larger cash position and getting ready to take advantage of that if that time comes, whether it's including through investing in the stock market at that time more heavily, or buying real estate, you name it. There are different ways of investments that you might consider. That doesn't mean that for me as a stock market investor, I'm totally staying out of the market and not buying any more stocks. In fact, I'm still gradually putting money into the market because there's no way for me to perfectly time the market. But if I'm anticipating that there might be some recession on the horizon, I'm trying to slow down how much money I put in the market. And in the meantime, build a larger cash position on the side so that when the right time hits, I can deploy it much more quicker and much more efficiently. That's one of the ways I'm trying to address that. Now, you might be asking me, all right, if you're keeping aside a cash position and putting it aside, given how high the inflation is, where are you keeping your money just so that you don't continue to lose money a lot on it? Now, admittedly, it's going to be hard for us to find a savings account that is going to give us a high, very, very high interest rate on our savings that meets or exceeds the the inflation rate, given how hot inflation rate is, upwards of 7%. And because we want to actually save our money in a savings account that we can access it more easily. We don't want to put it in a, let's say, 3 months, 6 months, or 9 months guaranteed income kind of accounts, because they kind of lock your accounts. And if you do so, if you take out your money earlier, you're going to lose all the benefits. There might be some penalties and all of that. We are trying to pick a number of high savings accounts that give us a kind of relatively higher interest rate. These are not nowhere high, considered to be very high interest rates, but at least they are relatively higher than many other competitors. Obviously, it's not a surprise that they are not from big banks, and instead, these are some of the more unique banks that you're going to be finding around. One of them that I can think of is actually the Equitable Bank, EQ Bank. It's one of the online bank accounts that I've had for years now, I think over 5 years. You've been using it as one of my major bank accounts. One thing that I like about the EQ Bank is that their savings account can be used almost as a checking account without any transaction fee. And it does pay currently a dividend yield of 1.65%. There is another account is called the Neo Money I do not currently have a Neo Money account, but I noticed that it does actually offer a quite high interest rate. Its interest rate at this time is at 1.80%. It's higher than EQ Bank. You might want to consider giving that a try as well. Like I said, I do not currently have that account, but I do have a product with Neo. In fact, I do have a Neo MasterCard, and I absolutely love that. Lastly, Tangerine Bank is another option to consider. While their posted rates currently is not the greatest, in fact, their Tangerine savings account posted rate is currently at 0.40%, less than 0.5%. They once in a while, they do offer some promotional rates to their clients. For instance, back in April of 2022, on April 1, they did send an email whereby you could activate, and this was sent to me, whereby I could activate a higher interest rate at 2.80%. At first I thought it might be an April Fool joke, but then I read through the email, and in fact it was actually a legit interest rate. So I opted for it, activated that account, and ended up putting a large portion of my account into Tangerine savings account that I have. So I kind of moved my money out of EQ Bank, put it into Tangerine. This offer, that as they're offering it, is available as of that day all the way until end of August. So a large portion of my cash position is right now in Tangerine because I want to take advantage of this 2.8% interest rate that I haven't seen elsewhere by other banks out there without any strings attached in a sense. As soon as that kind of promotional rate is over, if my funds is still available and I haven't used it, I will be moving it back most likely to EQ Bank to try to take advantage of that higher rate compared to the typical regular rate that Tangerine tends to offer. Well, there you go, folks. A quick look into ways to prepare better for a potential recession. We also talked about 3 bank accounts here in Canada that could be considered for those who are wanting to kind of park their funds on the side as they're building a larger cash position. We do have some referral links for these financial institutions that I would add them in the description of the video. If you use them, you would be supporting us and our channel, but also it would be providing you with a bonus sign up bonus. So I hope that's something that interests you. As always, if you enjoyed this video and gained something of value from it, please don't hesitate to smash that like button and subscribe to our channel. Here on Momentum Finance, we post every week several videos about investing, including investing in dividend stocks, growth stocks, penny stocks. We also talk about ways to reach financial freedom. Thank you, and I hope to see you next time.